When I look around the room today, I have to say I'm filled with hope, because since I started work on the Travellers in Prison initiative as coordinator, I really have been bowled over by the level of commitment, humanity and the passion of so many of you in the room today to try to genuinely improve the situation of travellers in prison and to reduce the likelihood of them returning to prison. I couldn't possibly name all of the people I have to thank for their support in making today a reality, and even more importantly, for their contribution to the work of the Travellers in Prison initiative to date. But I have to say a special thanks to St Stephen's Green Trust, the Irish Prison Service and the Probation Service for funding this initiative. And I want to thank the team in St Stephen's Green Trust, Orla, Karen and Stephen, for their unrelenting support, and Kat and Casper for all their help with organising the conference logistics. I want to thank the steering group for doing everything in their power to enable me to do my job, be it advising me, removing obstacles, and introducing me to relevant people who can help me advance the work. I'm not going to name out all the organisations today because I know we're under serious time pressure, but it's a huge range of stakeholders from the state and the traveller sector, and I couldn't work with a better bunch of people, and sincere thanks for that. I want to thank all of our speakers today for rising to the challenge and overcoming their nerves in order to share their insights and learning with you. A sincere thanks to you all. And finally, I want to say thanks to all the travellers in prison who've so generously shared their stories, their experiences, and have advised me on guiding the project forward. I'm sorry that they can't be here today, but we'll communicate this back to them. Now, the Minister has stolen some of my storm here, so I'll cut some of my presentation out. But just to say that, as he said, the background to the Travellers in Prison initiative can be traced back to the report done by the Irish Penal Reform Trust in 2014 on the experiences of travellers in prison. It highlighted the challenges experienced by travellers in prison, and it was the impetus for a workshop to develop responses to the findings, which was co-hosted by the Irish Traveller Movement and the St Stephen's Green Trust. At this workshop, there was unanimous agreement that there needed to be a special initiative focusing on travellers in prison. Stephen's Green Trust agreed to operate the initiative, and steering group of all the main stakeholders was set up to guide it. As the Minister said, the aim was to try to bring about changes in policy and practice that would have a positive impact on travellers in prison. The initial phase of the project focused mainly, I suppose, on building relationships and on scoping out areas for opportunities and possibilities. The agreed approach was that we would pilot initiatives initially, then we would test them, and from the learning, we would try to replicate that throughout the prison system and probation. We agreed on 5 main action areas. Again, I won't list them out, but they're all listed there on the front of your conference brochures. The first one was trying to focus on getting accurate information about travellers in prison. And my colleague here, Kathleen Lawrence, is going to talk later on about the efforts to try to get better knowledge about travellers in prison through the ethnic data collection and monitoring. We also focused on the issue of traveller women in prison, because we felt that this was an area that we knew very, very little about, especially the pathways into prison and the post-release issues for traveller women. Bridget Kelly is going to share this research findings in her presentations. Thank you, Bridget. The second area that we planned to focus on in the Travellers in Prison initiative was travellers' access to services. And all the anecdotal evidence would indicate that travellers don't participate in services in prison to the same extent as non-travellers. This wouldn't be surprising to us, and I won't go into all the reasons for that situation here, but many in the room would know why travellers don't participate in services outside of prison, never mind in prison, to the same extent as non-travellers. But I'm delighted to say that one of the pilots that has been initiated was the work of the Education and Training Board with responsibility for the Dublin prisons, who agreed to pilot an initiative to try and increase travellers' uptake of education services. Jane Newman was appointed as coordinator of the pilot project, and there are excellent traveller liaison teachers in the Dublin prisons who've taken on the role of traveller liaison teachers. They've attended training on traveller inclusion and equality. They've organised events in the prisons to celebrate traveller pride, and they're exploring possibilities to make the curriculum within the prison more relevant to travellers. Unfortunately, there wasn't space in our programme today for them to do a presentation on all of this work that they've been involved in, but they have an excellent stand out in the Cork Bar, and I'd encourage you to go and visit it. Another area that we focused on as part of the Travellers in Prison initiative was the development of a peer support model that would strengthen travellers' sense of identity and advocacy. Michael and Nell McDonough are going to talk about the great work that they're doing in Wheatfield Prison as an example, and the plans that we have to try to roll out peer support services across the prison system. Chris McDonough and Frank Kavanagh from the Traveller Mediation Service are going to talk about a very exciting pilot in Castlereagh Prison, where they trained travellers as peer mediators. And the Galway Traveller Movement are piloting an initiative with Castlereagh Prison to provide counselling to travellers pre and post-release. Together with the psychologist from Castlereagh, they're exploring counselling approaches that are more appropriate to the needs of travellers. We'd hoped they'd be able to make a presentation here again today, but unfortunately we just couldn't fit it into the programme, or we'd have to keep you here all evening. The final area I'm going to speak about today in our work programme is the area of family support. There is no doubt that families pay a very high price when a loved one is imprisoned. We're piloting the development of resources suited to the needs of traveller families for community organisations who are interested in supporting traveller families. We hope to use the learning from this to try to inform the Family Links programme being rolled out across the prisons. Because Castlereagh has such a high percentage of travellers, I think at least over 50% of the population in Castlereagh Prison are travellers, we're focusing a lot of our initiatives in Castlereagh Prison. We've recently contracted an independent evaluator to evaluate the work of the Traveller Prison to date, looking at the impacts and the achievements and the priorities going forward. He's met with a range of people here in the room and outside it, and I suppose that although it hasn't been signed off yet by our steering group, the main thrust of it is that there's general agreement that the Travellers in Prison initiative has made a significant impact across a range of areas, while recognising that a lot of the work is still at a very, very early stage. There is no doubt that the approach wouldn't have been possible without the multi-agency approach that we've adopted. Although it was initially intended that the TPI would be a 3-year programme, there's widespread agreement that the work needs to be continued and extended. I suppose some of the challenges going forward is to try to reach into more travellers in prison by mainstreaming the pilots across all the prisons. And in the next phase, there is a serious need to focus on post-release issues for travellers, including employment. And we're looking at some interesting developments there with the Prison Service, Probation and the Red Cross. I hope that the commitment of you all will continue into the future. I'll just finish by saying that the issue of travellers in prison is a symptom of the failure of society in all aspects of traveller lives. And that's why it's so important that the traveller organisations and the state work together, and the traveller organisations are supported and resourced to continue to tackle all these areas of disadvantage in travellers' lives. Thank you.